Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, Kenna.
And today, Kenna, I wanted to ask you, have you ever taken a bus in LA?
A bus in LA? I have, but it was like many years ago. I was like not even 21 years old. So it was a long time ago.
So I've also taken a bus in LA one time. It was to go to a music festival. But I have taken the train, the subway. Have you ever taken?
Oh, the subway, yeah. I live by the subway. It's cool. It looks like a Blockbuster video in Hollywood.
It does. It's very 80s.
It looks like an 80s Blockbuster video.
Yeah. And So I used to take the subway as my only mode of transportation for a few years. And I noticed it was always pretty empty, pretty abandoned, like even at rush hour.
Yeah, it's eerie, but it's cool. And it's weirdly like, it's nice.
Yeah, it is. So when I moved to LA, I moved here from San Francisco, and San Francisco has like great public transportation, you know, like the city's formal position is they're trying to make it as hard as possible for people to have cars. So like everyone's cars would get ticketed nonstop and towed. And I moved to San Francisco with a car, and then it was so difficult having it there that, I got rid of it. And then I just took, the BART, the Metro, even the rail cars. And then, of course, the city's only 7 miles across. So I'd walk everywhere and take my bicycle also. And I loved it. And I remember when I moved to LA, I was really sad that I'd have to get a car. That was like a major thing. So I'm like, there's no way you can just take the subway everywhere here. And the city's too big to walk around. So I got a car. And I remember like the first major kind of culture shock I had here was, oh my God, now I'm just in my car all day. And like how in San Francisco, because people didn't have cars, on your days off, you could just walk outside and like the day would happen to you. Like you could walk around, you'd run into people you knew. Like it was just much more conducive to like interpersonal activity, because even your transportation was in this way like social, because you were walking down the street next to people and you were more likely to see people you knew. So I moved to LA and I got this car, which I needed for work because the subway only goes like 4 places in the city. And I was super miserable. And then eventually I remember I got a new job that was off of the subway line. Ooh. The purple line, Wilshire. And I lived next to the purple line. And I was like, oh my God, I can get rid of my car. And I literally just took the subway everywhere.
Wow.
And this was like maybe for 2 years. And I remember telling people like, no, I don't have a car, I take the subway. And everyone would look at me like I was out of my mind. They're like, what? And I remember there was this like Maria Bamford joke about how when she moved to LA, one of her friends called her once and was like, where are you? And she was like, oh, I'm on the bus. And her friend was like, oh, what happened? Are you okay? Do you need me to come get you? Because it's so uncommon for people in LA to take public transportation.
Yeah, it is a very LA thing, because I was thinking the only time when I did not drive in LA was when I was visiting, when I was in my early 20s or even before.
And that's when you took the bus as a visitor.
I took the bus. I would also just walk, which was hot.
Yeah, well, there's that song, nobody walks in LA, right? I also walk in LA a lot, and people think I'm out of my mind. But when I tell them, like, well, I moved here from San Francisco, they're like, oh, that explains it,
Yeah, when I had my store, people would come in from New York, and they'd be like, I walked here from wherever, and I would be like, that's like a mile. Yeah. And I'm like... But they're like, oh, I'm from New York. I'm like, oh, I see.
Now, okay, so you moved here from Portland. Did you take public transportation in Portland?
Every once in a while, I would ride my bike. I mainly drove because in Portland, my job kind of required it when I was selling vintage clothing, because I needed to transport, from the place where I got the clothing to the other place. So it just wasn't really conducive to my job.
Right.
And then I had a job before that was in a weird industrial area that was like not really a good place to get like bus service. So I had a car, and then but it's way easier to get around Portland, like if you don't have a car. Like I know a lot of people who don't have cars there, they just bike.
Yeah, so I was thinking about all of this, and I was thinking about how, like, I love living in LA, but one of the things I miss is like how walkable San Francisco is. And even now, because like work is across the street from my house now, I hardly ever drive, and just like how much better my quality of life is like as a result of that. And then I started thinking about public transportation in general and how it seems like even the place I lived that had the best public transportation, which was San Francisco, which I think has like the 5th best public transport in the United States, is still severely lacking compared to other countries. And so my hometown is Fresno, which is halfway in between San Francisco and LA. And my whole life I've been hearing they're going to build a bullet train. Like they're going to build this high-speed train that goes from San Francisco to LA, and it'll stop in Fresno. And when it does, our economy will boom because people can get from LA to Fresno so fast that Fresno will be like a viable living destination for commuters. But, you know, I'm about to be 35 and this has never actually happened. But this is like this myth of this promise of public transportation. And I remember my whole life they compared it to like the bullet trains in Japan. Like, oh, well, they have them in other countries and like one day we'll get it. But it always seemed like this myth on the horizon. So today I wanted to talk about why public transportation in the United States is so bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's bad. So in 1960, 12% of workers in the United States commuted using public transportation, but that's compared to just 5% in 2019. So Whoa. That's a decline of over 50%. We have like less than half the people using it now that did in 1960. And in 1960, it wasn't that many people. And today, 45% of Americans have absolutely no access to public transportation. And those who do experience lower ridership levels, fewer service hours, and longer wait times than other comparably wealthy nations in Europe and Asia, which I think is what you and I were describing. Like, there are places you wanted to go in Portland that you couldn't get.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't go.
And, you know, I grew up in a small town, you know, like less than 20,000 people. So if you took a bus, you took a bus to school, and it was the school bus. That was the only public transportation.
So I definitely grew up taking city buses all over my city, but I grew up, again, in Fresno. It's a city of over 500,000 people. And I remember I took the bus pretty much everywhere, but I do remember that the second you got to like the city limits, like a new city has started, like the city of Clovis has started, there is absolutely no public transportation there. And we only had buses, which I feel like for a city of that size, 500,000 people, is pretty uncommon. There was no underground system, no railway system.
Whoa.
Right. And we had like Amtrak came into the city and stopped, but just downtown where nobody really went because downtown was kind of weird and abandoned. So first I wanted to define like what actually constitutes public transportation, because there are so many different systems like we were talking about. There's buses, there's light rails, there's subways, there's commuter trains, there's streetcars and trolleys, cable cars, and then even like van pool services, water taxis, ferries. Those are all also considered public transportation, as are monorails and tramways, which I always think of as just kind of a novelty. Like I know they have them in Seattle.
Yeah. I was actually, my mind went a little bit to like, remember the trolley and Roger Rabbit? And wasn't that a movie about public transportation or something?
We should rewatch
Sorry,
that.
my brain went a little like, wow, yeah, the public transportation in Roger Rabbit. I should think about that.
Yeah, I should watch that. I'm interested now. So approximately 6,800 organizations provide public transportation in the United States. However, despite all of this, we still have some of the worst public transportation in the world compared to other wealthy nations. It's just not big enough to be actually useful for most people. And until it gets a lot bigger, it just doesn't serve as a viable option to replace car travel.
Yeah, I was listening to something on NPR where someone was like, I took public transportation in LA, and I did bus, Uber, and then compared it to my car, buying gas, insurance, car payment, and it was nearly the same price. So I just ended up driving my car, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, so while city planners in places like Paris, where more than 70% of people currently use public transportation, they're working on figuring out this thing called the 15-minute city, which is like a dream city where all of your needs are transit free. So it's just a 15-minute walk from your home to anywhere you need to go. So you don't need public transportation anymore. So they're on this stage where they're like, public transportation could be a thing of the past because we could walk everywhere, which is like, next level, like it's the brain exploding in the meme, you know. Here in LA, where only 9% of people use public transportation, we're focused on a different kind of 15-minute problem, which is having public transportation stop within a 15-mile walk to our homes, or 15-minute walk to our homes, which is called the first mile, last mile conundrum, which feels super outdated and sorely behind compared to other wealthy cities in the world, but also kind of ties in with what you were talking about the needing to take Uber. We need to take Uber because we can't get to the public transportation as easily.
Yeah, or the public transportation, even getting to the public transportation is inaccessible for many people.
Right. So that's the first mile, last mile problem that places like LA have been trying to figure out forever. But you run into this like catch-22 where it's like, okay, well then we need to put in more stops. But there's not enough revenue coming in from the public transportation program to warrant or constitute adding more stops so more people can take it. So this all ties into why public transportation in the US is so bad. Most of the things that we don't have, like we don't get in the US, it usually feels like it's because it's bad for capitalists, right? You're like, oh, rich people, they won't let us have this nice thing because it's not good for the rich people. But the interesting thing about public transportation is that if you invest in it, it's actually good for the capitalists too. Like it increases business sales and home values and generally improves the entire economy. So I'm extra stumped why we can't have this one nice thing, the public transportation.
I feel like it's the same thing where it's like people are like, well, we can't have healthcare because it's too expensive. And you're like, well, actually, if you gave free healthcare to people, it would be less expensive. So even if you're not going with the morality aspect that like we should help people, you can be like, well, it's actually cheaper to help people. It's actually cheaper to house people. So this is also my conundrum where it's like, if you are a pure capitalist, it is actually in your best interest, bottom line, money-wise, to help people.
It's true. So the economic impact of public transportation, currently in the U.S., it's a $74 billion industry that employs more than 435,000 people. And every $1 invested in public transportation generates $5 in economic returns. Every $1 billion invested in public transport supports and creates approximately 50,000 jobs. And every $10 million in capital investment in public transportation yields $30 million in increased business sales. So every $10 million in operating investment yields $32 million in increased revenue for businesses in the surrounding area, which makes sense because when I lived in San Francisco and I took like just even the streetcar, my school was on Market Street. So I would take the streetcar down Market when I needed something really fast because businesses were just off the line. It was so convenient. And I found myself maybe spending a little more than I otherwise would have because of the convenience factor. So this makes sense that, yeah, if you had a business and you had public transportation in front of it, more people would come to your business.
Yeah, especially like with places like bars and restaurants. It's like you can just take public transportation, go to a bar, have a couple drinks, and then take public transportation back.
Which is exactly what I used to do when I lived in San Francisco. And here in LA, I find myself going out less because it's either you have to drive your car and then you can't drink or have a good time because you're not going to drive your car drunk, or you're going to have to pay a lot of money for an Uber to go home at night. So also another thing is that home values are 24% higher when they're near public transportation than in other areas. And hotels in cities with direct rail access to the airports raise 11% more revenue per room than hotels in cities without, which also in San Francisco, I remember BART went straight into the airport. And I thought that was so cool. It just like went into, you're like in the airport now at your BART stop. You're just like, la la la, I can get on like right next to, you know, my house. And then boom, next thing you know, I'm literally in the airport. So all of these things, like we said, you know, are good. They're good for the capitalists. They're good for the people. Why can't we have the nice things? And there's all these excuses people come up with, right? So lots of people say that, well, it's because of Americans' like suburban sprawl issue, like that's to blame for our bad public transportation options. Like everything's just too far apart because cities and towns were built in the 1950s here. And it was starting to get really popular to drive. So we have these auto-centric cities and suburbs that are just too hard to serve with public transportation. However, Canada faces these exact same issues and has nowhere near the like public transportation crisis that the United States has. If you look at Portland versus Vancouver, Salt Lake City versus Edmonton, or Des Moines versus Winnipeg, culturally and economically, these are like very similar cities, but in each case, the Canadian city has between 2 times to 5 times more transit service per capita than the US city. So this can't be it. So I have some theories.
I would like to hear those because I have some thoughts too on why America likes to do this.
Why do they do this to us? Okay. All right. So I think our public transportation here is so bad because public transportation is seen either as a poor person issue by the wealthy or a metropolitan city slicker issue by the rural. And it's true that access to public transportation very much does help low-income people. The average household spends 16 cents of every dollar on transportation, and 93% of this goes to buying, maintaining, and operating cars, the largest expense after housing. And a household can save nearly $10,000 a year by taking public transportation and living with one less car. This is probably why so many Americans think about public transportation as like welfare or food stamps. It's something that, quote, hardworking people don't need because they can afford a car. And it's only there to serve the less valid, poor, or whatever. Despite the fact that most working class Americans actually cannot afford their cars either. We've just normalized car loans so much that as of 2020, Americans now have a record $1.36 trillion in car debt. And car loans now make up nearly 10% of all household debt, the third largest debt category behind mortgages and student loans. And the average monthly car payment in the US is $530 for a new car and $381 for a used car as of 2018, with the average lease payment per car being $430. It's a lot of money, and every single year those numbers go up. A bus pass, for reference, on average costs $58 a month in the US. So by contrast, Americans have nowhere near enough money saved for things like emergencies or retirements. But if you were to save the $530 a month that is the average new car payment every month for the age of 20 on and invest into the stock market, getting an average 10% return annually, by the age of 65, you would have over $5 million.
Damn.
So we are literally prioritizing car purchases over our retirement. And in a perfect world, we should have transportation and retirement. We should have all of it. But nobody can afford to do both because wages are stagnating in the US. And for most people in the US, public transportation simply doesn't get us everywhere we need to go. For 55% of us, it doesn't service us at all. So there's not really a motivation or incentive there for people to make this change. And again, realistically, like, we shouldn't have to choose one or the other. But living the way we do, you know, the cost of cars, it's not realistic actually for the middle class either, is what it comes down to. And the public transportation issue remains in our minds like some kind of moral judgment. The perception being, if you're poor enough to need public transportation, you deserve to be like punished for your poverty by having it be as inconvenient as possible or something.
That's like, that's just like, there is this like the weird punishment vibe in America.
Yes, we're punishing the poor.
Especially it's just like punishing things over what is systemic and not a personal issue.
No, and the people who think that they've transcended that, ironically, in this situation, are the middle class who actually, based on their wages, cannot afford to be driving their cars either because they're compromising their future well-being for their immediate, what they perceive to be well-being, by delaying things like retirement savings, which none of us have enough for, and instead putting that money into a car payment so they can feel morally superior in some capacity and not have to take the bus.
Yeah, and sometimes like I've worked jobs where it's like if I don't have a car, I don't know how I'm going to do this job because like, you know, like when I worked at the industrial place where it's just like where it's so unreliable. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever worked places where you're like, they're like, you're 15 minutes late. Like that's a write up, and 3 write ups you're like, so if public transportation is always late,
you can't count on it.
Yeah. So, and they're like, why are you not taking the car to work? It's like so wild. I feel like I saw something on Twitter one time where someone got fired because they worked at like, I forget, like maybe like a fancy real estate place or something like that. And their car wasn't nice enough, and their boss wrote them a letter being like, are you having financial problems?
I think I saw this
like,
too, yeah.
I see you don't have like a new car. Your car seems like, you know, this reflects badly on us, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, this is bad. Like,
it's all bad. There's no way to win.
The hell? Like,
so transit blogger Elon Levy actually talked about this as well and said the issue is that most Americans think, quote, it's considered okay if the bus comes every half hour, if it's a lifeline for people who literally can't afford anything else. So like you were saying, you know, the thing where I can't be 15 minutes late to work and this bus only comes 30 minutes. And at that, it's not consistent. Anybody who's taking the bus will tell you, like, the bus never comes when the bus is supposed to come. Like, if you want to get somewhere on time, like, you literally have to plan to leave like 2 hours early or it's just not going to happen. But we don't prioritize fixing this issue because we're like, well, the poors are lucky they have this option, you know, when they can't afford a car like me, you know, whatever that case is. And as for the rural versus urban situation, it remains true that older U.S. cities with pre-war street grids that minimize things like cul-de-sacs and other driving-focused street patterns like New York, San Francisco, Chicago do have the highest level of U.S. transit ridership. And rural communities in the U.S. have been pretty much ignored by public transportation efforts altogether.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you go to a small town, like,
there's nothing.
Yeah.
So this, coupled with the idea that the working poor in cities have an income that comparatively feels higher to people in rural locations, like a New Yorker working full-time at minimum wage makes $26,000 a year compared to just around $15,000 a year for people living off of the federal minimum wage in smaller places, it easily makes it seem like a rich city person non-issue to working class and poor rural Americans. And I get that because it's pretty hard for us to wrap our heads around like relative costs and expenses and how they vary from place to place, which is why we had to come up with like the Big Mac index, which is endlessly entertaining to me just to get a grasp on global macroeconomics. Like, we literally have to ask, well, how much does a Big Mac cost there to understand the value of money
like
from
when they
place
were like,
to place?
if we like raise the minimum wage, this is how much a Big Mac will cost. And I'm like, what about like an Impossible Whopper? Like, how much will those? No, it's just like, why is this the factor?
It's weird, but it actually has proven to be like more like accurate than other macroeconomic indicators for determining like what cost of living actually feels like from place to place.
Welcome to America, where McDonald's does the economics.
Yeah, and we do it in other countries too. So if you want to look at like what the value of a US dollar actually is in other countries, there's the exchange rate obviously, but that doesn't matter if you're like, say you want to live there and work there and make their wages. What does this amount of money feel like? And the best way to come up with it is the Big Mac index. So it's hard if you're like a rural person outside of a city to feel like you actually identify with somebody in a city who's poor, who makes nearly 2 times as much money as you do on paper. But then you have to remember that $26K a year income in New York sounds nice to someone living in Boise earning just $15K a year. But that $1,400 a month average rent in Boise sounds really nice to someone in New York City who's paying $2,500 a month in rent per month. So it's all relative anyway, but I think that it is hard for working class people in different geographic areas with different needs and issues facing them to relate to each other. And if you add on to that the structure of the American Senate means that federal policy is usually biased towards rural interests, with each state getting 2 senators regardless of population, meaning Wyoming, with a population of 580,000, has the same representation as California with a population of 39 million. And for reference, my hometown of Fresno, California, a place most people don't even think is real, has a population of 525,000.
Wow.
So almost the same size as the entire state of Wyoming.
Wyoming, there is not very many people there.
It is the least populated state in the U.S.
It's very windy. Being from Colorado, you go through Wyoming and you're just like, this is too windy, too windy. But it's very beautiful.
Yeah. So, but if you look at it, we have the same number of senators that Wyoming does. And the fact remains that it's going to be a hard sell to make rural people in Wyoming care about public transportation. Most of them live nowhere near a rail line. So why would they care?
Yeah.
So now you have this issue where you have wealthy people who have no need for public transportation. You have the middle class who thinks that they're better than the poor because they're spending what should be their retirement savings on a car payment that they actually can't afford because they've been told that this is what they're supposed to do. And poor people who live outside of metropolitan areas who have up to this point been neglected to be considered by public transportation planning entirely, rallying together on this issue to say, hey, this isn't really a me thing. Which is why in the 1960s, when other countries were building their public transportation systems, the US was not. And in some cases like Boston, we were actually actively destroying ones that had existed in the early 1900s, ripping out subway lines and streetcars. However, public transportation should be a me thing for all of us. Even though I completely understand why, especially poor people in rural communities are like, literally, how will this help me? And the key thing that I think about a lot is climate change being such a pressing issue. Approximately 85% of greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector are related to what we call the surface transportation system. So some people say taking public transportation is the single greatest thing any one person can do to help fight climate change. A single person who changes their 20-mile commute from a personal car to public transportation can reduce their carbon dioxide emissions by 20 pounds per day, or more than 48,000 pounds in a year, which is a 10% reduction in all greenhouse gases produced by a typical two-adult, two-car household. U.S. public transportation saves 37 million metric tons of carbon dioxide annually, equivalent to the emissions resulting from the electricity generated from the use of over 4.9 million households, which would be every household in Washington, D.C., New York City, Atlanta, Denver, and Los Angeles combined. Public transportation use saves the U.S. the equivalent of 4.2 billion gallons of gasoline annually and more than 11 million gallons of gasoline per day.
Oh my goodness.
And it added to that additionally, this is a thing I think about a lot, which would actually be a fun episode on its own. I mean, not fun, it'd be a horrifying episode on its own. But public transportation is so much safer than driving. Like, I heard this expert once talk about how driving has killed more people than every world war combined.
I believe that if you drive in California, you will see some shit.
Yes.
You will see, like, when I was driving from Orange County to LA almost every single day, like, I was like, wow. I mean, and I am the rare person who actually enjoys the process of driving. Like,
yes.
I enjoy it. But I was like, I would rather be reading a book right now or, like, taking a nap going from Anaheim to Los Angeles.
I mean, and also, not to malign the great city of Glendale, our neighbor to the east, but Glendale usually comes really high up on, like, the nationwide lists of worst drivers ever. I don't know if it's just, like, something about the city planning of Glendale not being conducive to actually driving, but it is, like, one of the most dangerous places in the U.S. to drive a car, and it is right next door to L.A., and every time I drive through Glendale, I'm like, wow, they really were not kidding. Like, people are driving absolutely wild here, and the only thing I can think is that something about the city planning was not, like, conducive to vehicle safety. Like, somebody failed to do the roads right or something.
Well, you know, they say that I listened to a podcast about
okay.
Well, what we need are roundabouts and more four-way stops and less stoplights, because what happens is people, like, basically zone out, so they don't see things that are unexpected, like if someone, like a pedestrian is crossing during a red light, or they just, so it's actually more conducive to have, like, a system more like the UK for like setting up cars and stuff, because cars are fucking dangerous.
They are. So traveling by public transportation is 10 times safer per mile than traveling by automobile. And a person can reduce his or her chance, or their chance, thank you data, be more inclusive, of being in an accident by more than 90% simply by taking public transportation as opposed to commuting by car.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I love to drive. I love a long drive. I love, like, a long road trip, just driving. And yeah, but it's so dangerous.
It's so dangerous. So all of this sounds like catastrophic, right? You're like, well, what do we do? Like, the only people who are actually using public transportation systems are, like, the poor in densely populated urban areas, which seems like a relatively small percent of the population, even though it actually isn't that small percent. Like, how do we get people to care about this and expand the use of public transportation to be more akin to how other countries treat it and less like a social safety net thing here in the United States? Like, how do we get middle-class people to get rid of their cars and take public transportation, or at the very least just go from being a two-car household to a one-car household? How do we like make rich people take the bus too, which also actually should be a thing that's good for like rich people's sense of empathy, because I read this study once that talked about how wealthy people have a harder time empathizing with others because they have literally so much physical distance between them and others. Whereas if you live closer to people and you interact with them, you're more likely to think of them as your community and empathize with their plights and struggles, which happens on places like public transportation. You're literally sandwiched next to other people. It's hard to ignore that they're human too. So yeah, it's like, how do we do this? And is all hope lost? And fortunately, it's not too late. In the last 30 years alone, almost 24 countries have built true high-speed rail networks with trains capable of going over 120 miles per hour. And China basically had no rapid transit through the 1990s. And now they have 25 cities with comprehensive rail systems, including 7 of the world's 12 largest metro networks by length.
Whoa.
So it can change in just a short amount of time. It can change in a lifetime. We just need to prioritize public transportation and change the narrative around whom it benefits and how.
Yeah, and I think that we should just make all the subways look like 90s blockbuster videos, so they're all cool and we all feel like Hollywood stars whenever we go anywhere. And
it's fun.
And it's fun. Like, that's what I feel like. It really, if we made it cool and fun and it could go places, like everyone would want to go and people would like it. And they're like, I want to like party on the subway instead of being enraged in my car driving on the 5.
Yes. I mean, okay, even where I live now, I do have a friend who lives in Koreatown where the subway does go and it's actually a viable transportation option. And she told me when I moved, she was like, oh my God, I'm so excited because the last place you lived was really impossible to get to on public transportation. And she goes, what's your new address? And I tell her and she puts it in and she's like, this is just as hard. Like the nearest stop is like 2 miles away from my house. And it's just not realistic for most people to walk 2 miles after they get off the subway. It's too far. So yeah, the investment really has to be in more stops, better transit options, getting people to and from the stops with that like first mile, last mile issue that we run into, that in LA, honestly, we're lucky if it's only a mile. It's usually much more here.
And being accessible.
Yes.
And like, yeah, it's like all these things. And it's just so if you don't have to think twice about taking public transportation, how amazing would that be? Like,
It'd
you're
be
just like,
amazing.
oh, I just go out, I walk a block up the street and get on and see everybody who I see in my neighborhood on the streetcar. I'm like, on the Roger Rabbit trolley.
I mean, I did take one of those in San Francisco every day.
Which I don't know. Now I don't know if that's real in that movie, and I don't know why.
We gotta watch it. But
I know. I keep thinking about, I'm like, I'm trying not to daydream about my future utopia and how we're all getting around and how easy it is for everybody.
Well, I think it's good to daydream though, because when you dream about the type of place you want to live in and like what kind of environment actually would be good for you to be in, it like drives the potential possibilities for the future, because suddenly you've created demand. Like if we all had a demand for better public transportation, that's how things get supplied, right? In our current system anyway. Like if we told people like, no, we need more transportation, not less. I would love to be able to take, the subway or even a bus compared to my car, especially in Los Angeles where there's so much traffic. Like if we start building this demand, people will start servicing it with a supply. And even like linking rural communities together with like a train line.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Like when I lived in Colorado, if there would have been just like an easy train to go to like Colorado Springs or Denver, like I feel like I would have felt way less alone in the world, especially when it was like snowing and you would be like, I can't go to the nearest like big city because it's icy as shit out. Like,
yeah, and I think that they do have this more, like in the UK we see this, and in Asia, like in Japan too, where you'll have at least like a train connecting, like even if it's just one stop in a rural town, like what a difference that can make in terms of public transportation. For me, this was a major issue for me actually, because there was a period of time in my life where I lived in Fresno and I worked for a company that had like multiple locations, and for a while I needed to work in Modesto and Stockton, and there just being a train that I could take from Fresno to Modesto and Stockton, and then I could get off and use the local bus systems there. That was amazing because, yeah, Amtrak did run up through Central California, but the ticket prices were really, really high, which is this other thing that people talk about as being like an issue. Like, in the US, we often fight to keep public transportation costs really low because we do view it as like a social welfare program for low-income people. And it does need to be accessible, but at the same time, we're not able to charge enough to pay for the actual cost of the services, which is why the services are so incomplete and low. And they are being subsidized by taxpayer money and federal money, but just not enough. So you're in this like weird place where the capitalists are like, well, people need to pay more for it. And then the people are like, well, the only people really taking it are low-income people. Why would you make them pay more for it? Like, that's not right. But I think there's like the ultimate overlooming budget issue of like how federal funds are allocated. And I think most people view these as citywide or statewide issues rather than like a federal issue, which is why there's not like federal money going into it.
Yeah, they're an everybody issue.
It's an everybody issue. And it would be amazing to have states interconnected with like a federal rail system.
That'd be cool.
Or like a high-speed federal rail system even. And, you know, the money's there. We all know the money's, it's just in the defense budget.
Oh, yeah, it's all
in the defense budget.
Also, not to get into that because I'm not an expert, but like just even doing a little bit of like modern monetary theory, or can we pay for everything without it causing inflation? I'm like, absolutely yes.
Yes, just
totally.
pay for it. Just pay
I'm
for
like,
it.
not to be like, you know, naive or, you know, uneducated, but I'm like, money is not real. We can pay for it. Like,
yeah, we can pay for it.
Like they've done it where I'm... Don't get me started.
No, but it's true, and it would be so cool. Like, I know we have Amtrak, right, which takes you from place to place, but it costs just as much as flying, so why would I not fly?
Oh, yeah, I would. Oh my gosh, if I could take like a cool train from LA to Colorado, oh, that'd be so amazing. Side note, there is an old like tiny train that runs through my hometown that used to connect like all the old West cities in Colorado. Wow. So it would go through the Royal Gorge. So it would go next to like the river, and like one of like my grandmas like took it in like the 1940s or something. But
wow.
Like there used to be like
we used to have more train infrastructure.
Like stuff like that where it's just like, oh my gosh, I would love that because I hate flying.
Yeah, I mean, so I live in LA now. I have family still in Fresno. I want to go visit them sometimes, but Amtrak doesn't run from LA to Fresno on a train service, on a rail service, because there's the Grapevine, there's the mountains in the way. So you have to take a bus from LA to Fresno, and then if you wanted to go up from Fresno to San Francisco, you can take like a train the rest of the way from there. I think the bus actually goes up to like Bakersfield. It goes like halfway. But even just the idea that I'd have to be on a bus for half of it, rather than them creating a rail system that easily connects along the coastline where it's flat, then up to Fresno, it's like I would actually take the train if it were cost effective and I didn't have to switch off of a bus going over mountains. Like if it were more efficient, I would take that all the time instead of driving, especially if I could bring my dogs on the train.
Oh, that'd be cute.
Because in San Francisco, I have a 13-pound dachshund named Modog, and Modog used to come on BART with me all the time because dogs were allowed on BART.
Oh, that's so cute.
I know, and she would sit on my lap, and it was really chill, and, you know, it just like if you made it more usable for people in their real lives, how they need to use public transportation, which shouldn't be a stretch. It shouldn't be that far off. It should be something realistic. So, and I think that goes along also with, like, it all ties in my head with the housing crisis and housing shortages in urban areas, because if we start to value densely populated urban areas a little bit more and service them and provide for them in the United States like people do in other countries, like, it shows you how much more walkable our cities could be, how much more usable our cities can be if the living areas are actually like compacted in a smaller region. So then all of a sudden it doesn't cost so much money to build rail lines to every far-reaching corner of this land, like area within the county or whatever of Los Angeles, if most people actually are living in houses that are not just one home on a plot of land, say it's like an apartment building, you can service more people that way. You know, the more densely populated housing you have, the easier it is to provide more people with public transportation. And that's another issue we have in the United States. There is our suburban sprawl to some extent, but I think it's like a combo of both. It's like reimagining how we planned cities after coming out of this like car-centric hellscape that we created post-industrialization, you know?
Yeah, and it's just like, it's also a level of like, for me, it's like just thinking like, dang, like, I think public transportation and, not public transportation, like transportation, like cars, airplane, stuff that we use now is like a really big impact on like the environment and climate change.
It is.
I would like to stick around for a couple more generations.
Yes.
And not have it be like 120 degrees every summer.
Yeah, and also climate change disproportionately affects poor people. It's poor
Absolutely.
people and low-income people who are most affected by climate change, which we tend not to think about, because it almost feels like an intellectual or upper class issue, because money, low income, and poor people don't have like the luxury of thinking that far in advance. It's more like, well, what am I going to do next week when rent's due? Like, what am I going to do to pay this bill? Like, it's very short term thinking. But it's up to like policymakers and people who do have the luxury of long-term thinking to plan on behalf of people who are most at risk. And the people most at risk are low-income communities,
Absolutely.
are poor people. So it's something that like ties in more ways than one and like helps everybody. And, I know like you talked about Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk just doing space capitalism and leaving our planet to turn into a trash can.
Just do that in space. Leave us alone.
But if they don't do space capitalism, they might also need the planet at some point.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how we convince rich people to care or know that we're human. I don't think we can. But unless we stop buying their shit. I don't know. How do we make them care? How do we make them care that we need to get places?
Oh.
And then I'm like, don't they have enough taste to want to live in a place that seems cooler?
Money doesn't buy taste.
Money does not buy taste. I think there's Donald Trump in his ugly gold apartment with his gold toilet. They don't care.
I learned that from when I was a teenager watching MTV Cribs. Money does not buy taste.
Money does not buy taste. So I guess the only way we get the public transportation of our dreams is to eat the rich. That's the only solution that ever comes to mind. So we can have our high-speed rails and our trains and our beautiful bullet train that takes you from LA to San Francisco in an hour or whatever.
Ooh.
It'd be so nice.
Oh my gosh, so nice.
So nice. Okay, Kenna. So with all of this in mind, describe to me your ideal city you'd like to live in and how public transportation would or maybe would not affect and play into that life that you would like to imagine yourself having.
Ooh, so I feel like I've been watching a lot of anime lately where people like live at these like fantastical like boarding school style like college type campuses where like you go and you can like walk outside and take the trolley to like the cute little restaurant, and like you have a little place that's like almost like campus style where you're like, oh, there's the cafeteria where we get our like yummy gourmet style food, or it's like it's good, and then I can like go and like study a little bit about history, or like I don't know, my mind is all over the place. But I've also been reading this book called The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, where it talks about kind of like an anarchist moon utopia. And they talk about having like a lot of campuses where people can just go and eat and hang out with each other and like kind of bounce around from like, oh, I was helping at the place where we study physics, and then I went into the cafeteria to eat some food, and then saw my friends at their like little abode, and we all hung out. So maybe that's not public transportation, but for me, it's also very like, that's kind of like the idea that I've been thinking about lately. But in like terms of like real life transportation, like in the here and now, it would be so amazing to just be like, oh, I can walk max 3 minutes anywhere to get onto like a cute like rail or bus or driverless vehicle where you can just get in with someone else. It like feels like you can zip around really fast. You can get a drink, go back home, not worry about it. I would love to be able to like take a bullet train from Orange County to LA.
Oh, that'd be
and
great.
from LA to Colorado.
Not to the great city of Fresno, California?
I have never been to Fresno.
Okay, we're gonna fix that.
We'll do an episode where you take Kenna.
I'm gonna do a Fresno episode.
You take me to Fresno. And I just take it all in.
And then we could do a Colorado one.
We could do a Colorado
That'd be
one
fun.
too. But I might be going all over the place. And like before when I had the idea about Roger Rabbit, and I have not seen that movie in years, and I'm like, what is even in that movie? Is it good? Is it bad? Why do I remember a streetcar in this movie?
I think there is a streetcar.
I think it involves around like some sort of like deal where like the rich people of Toontown are trying to take over the public transportation. Like,
and there's like a shoe involved somehow. It's like a talking shoe. I don't know.
We need to we need to
look into this again, yeah.
I would just love to be able to like read my trashy romance novel while drinking a latte, going from Orange County to Fresno to Colorado.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I think that when I think about my ideal city structure and like how I would like to live my life and like what my values are in like constructing what I believe to be a good life for myself, I think similar to what you were describing, it is very community oriented. I think that conceptualizing of our like nation or whatever, or this environment we live in, as a series of small communities that are interlinked together to sometimes solve bigger issues, I think that that's beneficial. And I think I understand why Paris was looking to do the 15-minute city thing, where they're like, everything is within walking distance of 15 minutes from your home. And I don't think that's realistic for every community or environment, but it would be nice to try to maximize, like, think about like your house is the center of a radius, and maybe within 15 minutes of walking, you have most of the things you need, like a grocery store and maybe a little cafe and a school and hopefully your job. And then if you extend a little wider out from there, you have like bigger city services you might need, like more nightlife, restaurants, bars, entertainment, music venues. And then if you go a little further out from that, you even more city services that maybe are on a bigger scale, like airports and major railways.
Yeah, one thing that I think about is like kind of, I don't know where I was reading this, but like urban planning, whereas like in the past there would be like a little neighborhood and it would have like a grocery store, like a place to get coffee, pharmacy, like you'd have like all like a bunch of variety of different things in a little area. But once they started like city planning, they're like, we have a business area, we have an area for restaurants, we have an area where people work, we have a district for clothing, we have a district, like you break up the districts, and what that created was really intense traffic.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I feel like my dream would be to have options and then have walkable things, but then have everything else obviously be accessible through a network of like subway is what I like. I like the subway. I like the streetcars. I like those better than buses, but I don't mind buses. But it would be amazing to be able to hop on the subway to go out for the night, and like you were saying, to know that you could have fun and not worry about getting home. Even in San Francisco, where I loved the public transportation there was always the issue of like the BART cuts off at midnight. You can't be on the BART past midnight. And they would extend it on holidays. But even that was like a big kind of blow to like socializing in nightlife and having like a vibrant nightlife community, which I obviously enjoy. So I think like that would be how my ideal city would be set up. And it would be very, very focused on public transportation. And ideally, I would not have a car. I would not need a car. And that would be what would be most favorable to me, I think, in that situation. But yeah, it just seems so far removed from the life we have that I'm like, is it possible to live in a better world? But then, other countries are doing it. So clearly it is possible. We just have to want it enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think also we get kind of caught up on what messages we should be pushing for. And, within our movements, within our communities, how do you prioritize? How do you come together to focus on one thing? And if you were to do that, what would be the most important thing that has the most impact for the most people? And I think sometimes in social community, in this way, we end up in analysis paralysis together. We end up in collective analysis paralysis where we can't choose the best thing to focus on. So we end up just going, and focusing on none of it. Or the most immediate pressing issues, which are very obvious, like human rights violations, which obviously should always come first. But a lot of the little things do, I think, fall by the wayside. And it would be nice if we could find a way to integrate these little topics about things like transportation into our greater conversations about accessibility on the whole for cities, and about poverty and how these things interact with it. And to point out, I think just the inconsistencies where it's okay, we've made these car dependent cultures and then we've given everybody jobs where they can't afford reasonably to have cars. And what's that doing to us? What's that doing to people? To try to find these common threads where we can come together and instead of allowing the middle class to kind of psychologically align themselves with the wealthy, to remind them no, you're closer to the poor than you think. Your car does not absolve you from the need to think about public transportation. Your car is potentially doing more harm for you financially than good in a world where you should realistically, everyone should be able to have both transportation and elderly care. And you don't. And what does that mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think there is a utopia in there, and it is not car culture, in my opinion. The utopia is not, it's not car centric.
It's trolley centric.
It's trolley centric and cafeteria centric and the moon centric and bars.
Absolutely.
Because I like bars. They're fun.
They are.
That's it. We fixed it. We solved the world again. We solved all the problems in the world again. We're getting good at this. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast episode. If you would like to subscribe to our Patreon, we are patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. For $2 a month, you can get access to a link on our website where you can leave us voice messages and talk to us, and we might play them on our next episode and give you our advice, our feedback on problems you might be having in your life, answer your questions, anything your heart desires. And if you don't want to give us your $2 a month, that is fine too. We understand completely. That is your $2 a month. You keep it. I forgot what I was talking about. Okay, yeah, that's it. Thanks. Bye.